Well, hey, Merry Christmas, guys. It is another episode of Conservatism on Tap, and it is our Christmas episode. I am so excited. I am all into this season, and I am having a great time already, and it's going to get more fun as we enjoy some beverages, and I've got some snacks here. I'll show you in a minute. But first, I want to welcome Josh Lewis from Saving Elephants podcast. Man, you have been busy this week, and I can't wait to talk
Oh
about
yeah.
it and get into some of the things that you've been doing. Welcome back to the program, buddy. Always grateful to have you here. And
Yeah,
then my
good to
brother
be here.
John, my brother John, man, it's always good to have you as well.
Thanks.
I know you're having fun this holiday season. You know, what's the temperature up there in Richmond, man? How cold is it for real?
We haven't seen really any snow yet. Just it's been frosted over. Although there have been parts of Virginia, like near Bristol, like over near the Kentucky and Tennessee border, that's actually seen quite a bit of snow.
Yeah.
But right now, it's like typically 40s.
Okay.
On average is what we're looking at. So it's not too bad, but it's the rain, the wetness that makes it kind of muggy and gross. So my daughter really wants to go for walks every evening to look at the Christmas lights, but instead, driving is the way to go, no doubt.
I totally get it, man. I totally get it. Well, talking about coldness and wetness, I got to show you this picture from Josh's Facebook. It's been all kinds of exciting. So, man, we talked about this last time, and man, it makes me want to go get some like hot apple cider or like some, like jump in a hot tub myself. So this is the polar plunge thing, right? Like getting into the How cold is that water, bro?
That is 40 degrees, which the day after, actually, I had to actually pound on the water with my fist because there was a thick layer of ice on top. That hit 38. That was about the coldest I've ever been in.
Oh, my goodness. So
that'll wake you up in a hurry.
Oh, man, that is just a level of manhood I may never reach. So what's the thought? Like, what led you into this? And like, do you suggest?
I have a hard time explaining it. I think this is what the female species refers to as a stupid guy thing.
Okay.
But there's no science behind it. What's funny is if you like look up, is jumping into cold water good for you? You're going to see websites that claim it cures everything from cancer to toe fungus, and then you'll see other websites say don't ever do it, you're going to die. But for myself, I think we know that it increases immunity. It helps with clarity. This is going to sound weird, but I do it for sort of mental reasons. If you can see that picture of me there, I'm smiling, and I'm doing it because I'm taking a picture of myself. But if you actually saw me in this cold water, I usually have a big dorky smile on my face. And there's just something about, I don't know if it's the absurdity of being in the cold water. It's kind of like having a shot of caffeine in the morning.
I mean, it's mankind's triumph over nature is like what I'm seeing. Like, it's truly incredible. I've never done a polar plunge. Like,
No way.
Like, we have a heater for our pool, and if it's like below 80, 85, like when it's cold out there, I'm like, oh man. But so I mean, I live in Florida, dude. To me, when Jonathan talks about it being 40 degrees in Richmond, like that's cold, But my wife is from New England, and I showed her this picture too, and she was just like, yeah, I would never do that. So,
hey, and it should probably go without saying, but while it can be helpful and can certainly help with mental clarity and such, be careful. If anybody's out there listening to this, you don't just jump into cold, frigid water without knowing what you're doing. Wade in slowly, work your way up. Don't start off with, don't beat ice off of water and jump into that and see how that goes. Try to work your way up to it.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about our favorite movies last week, and It's a Wonderful Life. I'm pretty sure somebody dies in that movie or they almost died because they fell into like the
close to, yeah.
But hey, if they had been, Josh Lewis, they would have been fine. Like, he's into that stuff.
I will resort to, having staying well hydrated in my day. Like 16 cups of water or something like that a day, and then a shot of caffeine. I think I'll just stick with that. I think the closest I can ever get to that is maybe I'm going to get my mail, like, in sandals. Like, I think in this kind of weather, I think that's the closest I'll ever get to that.
What an incredible holiday tradition. So, my holiday tradition is I'm going to have some of this sweet baby Java that I've got, showing that to you right there. So I'm finishing off that. And then we are almost done with our Christmas cookies already. My wife goes to this little get together that they have, and like, all these different women, like basically they bake their cookies and they show up and they just exchange them. So you get one of like every kind, right? So you get this full like container.
Oh,
Yeah,
really?
this container's gone. Can you see that? Like there's like three left, and I'm about to eat them right now because my kids have been all into it. So lots of sugar, lots of having to brush your teeth numerous times a day. Lots of food. We're gonna smoke a turkey here in the next few days, so I'm excited about
Oh,
that.
fun.
So
That
we ran into our first. So there's a conflict between my daughter and my friend's daughter. They're on the
yeah.
same age, 6 years old, and we don't really play up the whole Santa Claus magic. That he's real, that he lives in the Arctic with the elves. Like Ellie knows that that is make believe, but we reemphasize that the magic is in the giving. That the reason that we dress up like Santa Claus is that he reminds us how to give. We play up, Saint Nicholas being inspired by Christ to give. Like, so she knows those stories, right?
Yeah.
Well, her friend Dagny does not, know those stories. She still holds to Santa Claus in the Arctic and that he visits everybody with reindeer. So they had their first conflict of like arguing whether he was real or not. And that was I was not prepared for that. I thought I was going to have like another year or two to like prep for those kind of confrontations, but that totally happened. They were having like a shouting match about like what's real and what's not. And I'm like, oh man, I did not know that Dagny believed.
Put him on trial. That's what I say. Prove it to us.
Right. Well,
Miracle on
Dagny pulled out
34th Street style.
she pulled out a dollar bill, was like, "In God we trust," so prove to me, that God's real. And oh man.
So maybe that's a segue into last week we did the Christmas movies that we love. What is the one Christmas movie that you hate, like, or dislike the most? And if you don't have any, that's fine. But I'm going to go ahead and take that and use it to answer what you just brought up, which is Miracle on 34th Street for me is one. The older version, that's some really good acting, and like the girl is great and all that stuff, but the newer ones and stuff, and just the whole like intolerance of the thing, and then its relationship like to God, be like, well, we don't have to prove God and we believe in him, so why should we have to prove, like, it doesn't make any sense to me at all. Like I've never gotten it. So that's one I deeply loathe and despise. I do the same thing though. Like I dressed up as Santa and went running on a 5K. My kids thought it was hilarious. They're like, "Oh, Daddy's Santa." I don't have any problem with like them taking pictures with Santa at school or anything else. And
Oh yeah.
but at the same time, no, I'm not going to sit here and like lie to you and like create some ridiculous fantasy. And the thing is, like, it's based on a real guy, right? Saint Nicholas, from what was then a different country, but modern day Turkey, and he was a saint who gave presents. So just tell the real story if you're going to tell a story, but mainly just have fun with it. So how about you, Josh? Did you grow up believing in Santa Claus, or did that change?
I not really. My earliest memories, actually, it's funny, John, you talk about that, was I got in a big argument with, at the time, my best friend Robert about whether or not Santa Claus existed. And I really wanted my mom to come in and referee and tell him that Santa was not in fact real. And of course, she wouldn't do that. She didn't want to crush childhood dreams. But I'm sure there was a time in my life when I thought Santa was real, but I don't know. At a pretty young age, like, this seems kind of silly.
Yeah. So, like, I think when I recall growing up, and I recall Wes telling me, like, I think Wes ended up finding out that Santa Claus wasn't real. But I'm pretty sure, like, the conversation, ended up being like, "So, do we still get the presents?" And like, I was like, yeah, don't worry. Like, mom and dad they still load you up. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, I actually remember where I was. We were in Alabama. We were driving, and I like just put it together in my little like child brain, like first grade, I think. I don't know. And I was just like, yeah, he's not real, right? Like, you just made that up, And mom was like, yep, yeah. I was like, oh, the world seems a little darker now.
How about that?
Solid all the way through, I guess. Like, it's really sad. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I try not to take it that deliberately or whatever. I'm just like, hey, you're gonna put some cookies out. I'm gonna freaking eat them right now. Not that we're gonna have cookies.
Oh, that's like, I'm telling the girls, oh, y'all get extra presents if y'all lay out the cookies for me.
Yeah. So, any movies you don't like? Josh, for you, is it that Jingles All the Way movie? I remember you said you tried it and you're like, you weren't having it. Is that yours?
Well, I certainly don't like them. I actually found out because the little boy in that movie
Yeah.
looks really familiar to me. And I found out he was also the kid that played Anakin Skywalker in Episode
kid.
1, The Phantom Menace.
Get
Yeah,
out.
and I mean, look, to be fair, I mean, he was just a
Yeah.
kid, so I'm not blaming him, but he had the rotten luck of, running the Star Wars franchise for me, if you will.
Yep.
But I mean, to be honest with you, it's just kind of Jingle All the Way is just sort of a goofy movie. I guess if there's one that I really don't like, it'd be Jim Carrey's rendition of The Grinch Who Stole Christmas.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Wow.
And mostly because
I did not expect you to say
it's
that.
not so much that's a terrible movie.
Yeah.
It's that the original didn't need improve. It's almost like they cut the heart out of what the original was and then just put a sort of Hollywood pizzazz into it. And so I thought that kind of
that's
cheapened it for me.
fascinating. I've never heard anybody say that. Yeah, but I can see it because it's all about like the Who's are like all into commercialism and they don't really know what the spirit of Christmas is themselves.
Change, that's right.
Yeah, like the kid's like a skeptic, she's like an anti-capitalist or whatever. She's and there's no in between except the Grinch himself is kind of in between.
Yeah.
Well, also like the Grinch is like kind of justified about his hatred against the Who's because even when he does like try to get accepted again, they start making fun of him all over again, like in his childhood.
The protagonist in the film, right? Like,
more
television than they do on her.
I could see that. I did try to rewatch it last year, and it was actually much harder to rewatch. There's the new How the Grinch Stole Christmas that's like done very Dr. Seuss style, like in regards to animation and its artwork that's much better. But yeah, it was hard to watch on that second rewatch of the Jim Carrey version.
He was trying to be like the genie in Aladdin, right? Like I think that's what he was going for, is he was trying to do that, like with all the like modern references and humor and stuff like
that. Yeah.
You're right. They did.
And to be fair, I'm not saying it's a terrible movie. There's something about Dr. Seuss that's whimsical and kind of magical, and they just didn't capture that well, in my view.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting take. Well, hey, so the other thing that you got going on, so we talked about the Christmas traditions and all that stuff, but you had a chance, and we talked about this in our last episode, to interview Yuval Levin, and I thought this was amazing, man. Do you want to kind of talk about this and your impressions from it and where people can go to see the episode? I got the link right here, but I know if you want to talk about kind of your blog and what led you to interview him and what that was like, that'd be awesome.
I don't know if I told you this or not, but in kind of a weird sense, Wes, you're the one that led me to interview him.
Nice.
I was watching your interview with him. I've been an admirer of Yuval for a while, but I guess I just never quite was like, why don't I just straight up email the guy and see if he would come on the show? It's as simple as that. I had no idea if he was going to take me up on it. And I think if I remember correctly, I had to email him and then like about a week later reply to the email. I don't know if he saw the original one, but he said yes. I mean, look, as well as I do, Yuval is an incredible intellect scholar in the Burkean tradition, if you will. I say this in the interview that I think he has, in my view, a very strong respect and understanding of both the right and the left. It does not mean he has an equal respect for both, but he's not one of these that the left is always wrong. We just need to tear them to pieces. He actually takes apart their best arguments and he takes them very serious. And that's what he tries to counter. And for that reason alone, I think Yuval is worth listening to. Yeah,
that's a great point. That's the thing, man, is there's so many conservative spokespeople out there, pundits and things like that. And they tend to I mean, I could like just pull up my phone and like half of them would come up and they're constantly demonizing the left. They're constantly straw manning their arguments, and they're constantly treating them all like socialists. On our other show, we were just talking about Tulsi Gabbard as a Democrat, as someone who considers herself a liberal, who is putting in more moderate, like almost pro-life legislation. And we were like, I was like, this is a great thing. This is awesome. And here she is as a part of the Democratic Party doing this. But those kind of people don't get the coverage because it just doesn't feed the war machine, of our media. And someone like Levin is not doing that. It doesn't make him someone who's an appeaser. It doesn't make him someone who's a moderate. To me, it makes him truly conservative because he actually understands the person that he's, debating, and he understands their core belief rather than, patronizing it or diluting it or whatever. And he doesn't agree with it, but he's going to take it full on. And to me, that makes you the much more of a conservative. But in today's time frame, I think people look at that and they're like, "Oh, it's nuanced, therefore it can't be true," and that's really unfortunate. So I love the
Mhm.
fact that you're doing that, that you're talking to him and all that. And I think John, you had some questions about it yourself, right?
I mean, I watched it and it was honestly an amazing watch. I wanted there to be more, and it was already at
Mhm.
least like 50 minutes, I'm like, "Oh, I could listen to this conversation for hours."
Yeah.
And I really felt like that treated him with the utmost respect that was deserved. And he had a lot of good responses, but mainly, it looks like your conversation focused a lot on the institutions
Mhm.
of America
Mhm.
and where we've gotten off track, and some possible solutions. But I'd like for you to just touch on I guess what some of the problems of the institutions that we have right now. For instance, I thought what was fascinating for me is how we talk about family as being an institution or the
Mhm.
church being an institution, but when we refer to them as institutions, it's that we're really trying to criticize it or say that there is a flaw with it. And how do we talk about our institutions in a more positive light? That's, I think, one of the things that I was taking away from the interview. It's like, how can I incorporate more language of my family and about how much that has changed my character, the church, and how much that has changed my character for the good. And I guess that's what I want to push back to you is, how are you going to go about your language differently when it comes to speaking about our institutions? I just don't want to speak about them in a way that's, when I say institution, it connotates something that's a negative. Something negative is
Yeah.
going to come out after that. Does that make sense?
Well, even if it's not negative, it's very clinical,
Yeah.
right? It's
Yes,
hard to
yeah.
get the warm and fuzzies about an institution, whereas a family or a church, you can. And that conversation comes from Yuval's latest book, and really the main thrust of his work of late has been A Time to Build. The idea that institutions are in trouble, and that this means we are in trouble. And I think one of his insights, I've heard him say over and over and over, is he charts part of the problem with what's going wrong with our institutions is they've ceased to be formative and they're now performative. And John, this goes right to the heart of what you were saying about it being your character is developed through the family, through the church, right? He's saying that if you think about an institution, he usually uses the example of the United States military. We would ordinarily think if someone is enlisting in the military, they're going to be a different person. If they're not, there's something wrong, right? The military shapes you. And as a result, we have a strong respect for the military. And unfortunately, a lot of our institutions that used to do that are no longer formative. It's now become a place or a platform where we can shout what our own limited stockpiles say of knowledge and our own character. And we don't look to it to shape us. Now, John, I don't want to stray too far from the heart of your question. You were saying that this was what called to mind for you was sort of well, how should I speak about these things now? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I think it was more along the lines of, yeah, how do I speak about, I guess, if I feel that my character is being built by family and by, say, the church that I go to, or, the meetings that I'm a part of, either at work or at school, at the schools that I'm part of, like, how can I portray that in a positive light? How do I convey that is a character building institution when so often when we're talking about these institutions, it's either in a clinical sense, about
Mhm.
rating its health or talking about its flaws. I guess I just want to be able to see how we can reacquire the character building narrative in our lives. And I know that part of that is in the living, but I'd love to see how that is in the storytelling, like the stories that we share. I mean, for instance, like, social media is all about trying to criticize, our school systems and about whether or not we're going to school or not going to school.
Mm.
Teachers are being, criticized. And I just feel like there's so much negative talk about these institutions and how much we're tearing them down. And I guess I'm wanting to focus on the building up. Like, how do I help build
Mm.
up how much these institutions have meant to me and how they have changed me?
I have a
That's
great
that's
idea
what I
for this.
said with my interview.
I don't want to answer this for you, Josh, but just a great idea
Sure.
is, I mean, you could, jump into some really cold water, right? Like, I'm gonna see if I can find that picture again. Um, but like, I could see you like in the future, like this is your tradition, man. Like, here it is. Like, something that would we call it like a stupid guy thing, but that's hilarious. It gets people talking, and right, like could have a couple kids in your lifetime or whatever, like people follow along and they do it, and that's like their holiday tradition and they celebrate and they're having fun. Um, smoking a turkey, like, and it's just as simple as like putting food on the table, but it's more than that because I'm actually putting more time and energy and effort into that as opposed to just ordering pizza, right? So that's something that's
Mhm.
special that my kids are going to enjoy and it's going to taste a little bit better, than what they normally get. And that kind of like creates these memories that we have, right? Like you post it on social media, you enjoy it. All of a sudden, you are celebrating your family, right? Do you call it, this is me, providing for the institution of the family such that sustenance is combined with festival merriment, to the betterment of our societal bond. Like, no, I'm not going to say that, right? I'm just going to post a, picture of cranberries, and oranges and turkey. But it's those type of things that we kind of like subconsciously, I think we're doing that we're celebrating, that we take a picture with our kids, and they're having fun. You go out and you throw a snowball in their face, like there's this kind of like unwitting, not even consciously purposeful, celebration of those institutions when we don't even realize that's what we're doing. Would be my
And
suggestion.
I think John, in response to your question, I think what Wes is saying probably helps flesh out in my mind why I'm really struggling with this because I don't know what actual language. I'm sure there are some things I could think of, and then maybe the three of us could. But I agree with you, Wes. It's in the doing, and one of the things that this kind of came to light in my conversation with Yuval Levin, and I wished, I'm with you. I wish I would have had more time with him. If I would have asked about this. Another area where I think our institutions uh, have a lot of trouble is if they lack a sense of functionality in our life. And what I
Yeah,
mean by that is
well
that if the
said.
family, there was an instance through most of human history, people got married because they pretty much had to survive. And I'm not saying that those instances don't still exist today, but we fortunately live in an affluent enough society. We have compulsory schooling, and the state has means of taking care of our kids, and we're mostly financially provided for, and men and women can survive on their own. To the point that oftentimes when we think about marriage, it's more about a love marriage. We chose this person, we're some sense of romance with them, and that's a wonderful thing. But it puts a strain on the family because we've lost some of those initial functions. Another example, I have a friend that there's a mega church here in Tulsa that she was talking about. They kind of played a commercial for the church where uh, a, a man and a woman were both with their friends, like at a bar or out at a party, and both chose to come to church. And it was kind of you were made to be aware of the fact that these were both single individuals who just happened to be sitting next to each other. And when church service was over, they looked at each other and it says something about, come to church, you never know what you're going to find. And the implication was a truthful statement, which is, a lot of us that are single, it's like, hey, I'd like to get married. And when you want to go to church, I'm going to find a good godly spouse there. But if that's the reason I'm going to church, then I've lost the function of church and I stopped going. So I'm on a bit of a soapbox. I'll try to wrap it up. I guess what I'm
No, I
saying is
get it.
that
Yeah.
you have, when you lose the function of something, no matter how much we can all agree this thing's wonderful, it's given us benefits, um, you lose the ability to have that language, that clear-headedness, the desire to see this thing going. Because sometimes churches and marriages suck.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're really hard. And the only way you get through those really hard things is if there's something other than you just looking for the benefit you get out of it.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just the experience itself, right? Rather than
Mm.
constantly pro and conning it or measuring it or things like that. Like I think that there's some naturalism to it, like this is what we were created to do. This is what we were born to do. So it kind of defends itself as, that people experience it. They see it. They're like, hey, this is something great. It tends to be taken for granted a lot. I agree, John. Like, and you want to look at more ways to do it, but living the example to me is the best way to promote these institutions and being purposeful about it. I mean, like, um, like it doesn't have to be something that is ornate or expensive or things like that, right? Like it's something that's real. It's something that's real. It's what works for your family. That's why I think it's awesome. Like, hey, that could be your family tradition, Josh. Like I don't plan on jumping into cold water anytime soon, but no judgment. Like that's what works. I had a friend of mine I saw who posted on social media, and she chose her specific career field in the military because that's what she was raised in. She was talking about her brothers and her parents and all that stuff. Like we're all into it, and so they wanted to be rescue, folks, and so she joined, that type of career field in the Air Force to fulfill the legacy, and that's what she was all about, right? Like it's these kind of personal, real, relationships that build our identity, and these traditions that we have, these institutions that we have, give us a strong sense of this is who I am. And that to me is the greatest benefit is in a world in which leadership, I think, isn't as common as we think it is, actually knowing a few things about who you are, what you stand for, it's something that's captivating to people. Everyone's online, everyone's posting all the time. Like there's content all day long, but how much of it is truly real? And I think that the people who are stand out. It defends itself in that way. So that's what I think. But it's a great discussion.
I think the reason it's an uphill battle to help defend our institutions is just because it does take time. It takes time to build character, and that's what they're ultimately there to do, is to build your character, to build your spirit, in my view, the soul. And like that's not an instantaneous process, but it's so easy to tear down with words and insults and data and criticism that it's such a, sometimes it feels discouraging. But y'all, I think that even just this very show, the fact that we meet so consistently is a tradition. And I think you're right, Wes and Josh, that like it's through traditions, it's through the stories that you tell, and that you keep telling those same stories over and over with your family, with the people that you're closest to, that help build that character and build you into being someone like a man of character that helps prove that what you are turning to is something that is well and good. If I am a horrible father, to my daughters, and I tell them about, you should believe in God, you should believe it, in who he is, like they're not going to be incentivized to do that if once they get wise and realize, well, your belief ended up, shaping you into being this terrible person. But if you're a loving person, a loving dad, and you start, telling these stories about God and say, this is the reason I am who I am. If you have any good gifts, like from me, it's because God has given me good gifts. Like that builds upon a narrative that hopefully builds their character in their life, which justifies, I think, the institution of the church and of belief. But it's such a time consuming process, and it takes week by week, day by day, just like what we're doing, just like the story that we're trying to tell with the Burking Conservative is like one podcast or one show isn't enough to let, to emphasize enough how much Burke's, views of conservatism really shape our lives. It takes every week to let you know that, hey, yeah, this is a lifestyle that I think falls back to what Burke was talking about before.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where that whole interview was leading me to think about like a lifestyle, of an institution.
Yeah, and to me, that's why, like, you don't see me get super angry on this show, right? Like, there are things that make me, angry, and certainly, like, liberals going way far to the left, like, is not something that I'm happy about. But I also know that we have to pace ourselves, right? Like, you see somebody sprinting, they're probably not running a marathon. You know what I mean? And life is a marathon, and there's always going to be a struggle. There's never going to be a time in our country and in our lives where there's not a threat to the things that we hold dear, our traditions, our institutions, our faith. There's always going to be a struggle, because that struggle honestly is within us too, right? Like none of us are perfect. It's our human nature. And so we're constantly going to have to be keeping that at bay, which means that we constantly have to be like spending time with the things that empower us and strengthen us. And so you kind of find your pace. You find your pace in this whole struggle. And that to me is why you can be positive, is it's not all bad news. When you're well paced and you're feeling good and you feel like you're ahead of this thing, right, there's a lot to celebrate. And that's why that's why to me, like, I can celebrate, like we got our like silly Christmas hats on, we're celebrating Christmas even in the age of COVID, because at the end I know that COVID doesn't get the last laugh. That's where my faith comes in, and all that. You're talking about Biden being elected, not somebody that I voted for. But hey, he doesn't get the last laugh and all this stuff, right? God does. That's what we're celebrating on Christmas ultimately, you know, is that, that Jesus was born and this was the light of the world. And because of that, we don't have to be dismayed by, bad things that happen in the news and things like that. So we can
And I think
celebrate, we can build traditions around it.
And I think regardless of what faith you have, close to Christmas time and regardless of what holiday you celebrate, you can pretty much guarantee that this is a time of connection, of human connection.
Yeah.
And that's what's just so desperately needed, like for the year of 2020. And I'm certainly, sure of 2021 as well, is that people feel so much more disconnected. Social media makes them feel so much more disconnected and ostracized. And I think that that's what this is all about, is just trying to build more connection. If I look back on 2020 and think about the connections that I've made, I mean, Wes, you and I have gotten even closer as brothers just through the Berking Conservative. Josh, I never would have met you unless we had started this.
Yeah.
All that is more encouraging to me, that connections are still being built. And that's where a lot of the answer lies, regardless of what faith you have. You've got to be connected to people that you disagree with, people that you agree with. It takes both sides. But that's definitely part of what Christmas is about. I don't care what faith you have.
Yeah, we've got Roger on here, so he's a longtime follower of the show. Just got his Constitution glass, so there you go. There's the tradition right there. So that's awesome. He was on our election show. He's talking about the vaccines that the country has. Right, there's 3 of them now. There's coming, and I guess guys, that's what I look forward to. Is I think it's too early to sit here and talk about election stuff and all that. I think because there's still so much to be sorted out, and people, it's early to sit here and say, well, Donald Trump was good at this, he was bad at this. Let's look at his presidency as a whole. So I don't want to go too far down that track. But I would tell you that I do think this is pretty obvious that he made conservatism much more formidable than, say, Mitt Romney and McCain did. And he made it strong in some ways, and the left feared him. But what I want to add to it is a sense of hopefulness. And he dialed into this from time to time, but I don't think it was enough. It's like, let's take the strength of Trump and let's add to it a little bit more of that Reagan-esque, Ronald Reagan type hopefulness in the future. And that's just where, adding a little bit more of your Christian faith into it provides that, is being able to say, there is so much to celebrate in life. Despite all of the darkness, there is still so much to celebrate. And there's so much that can be overcome by people who are, of that mindset, and focusing on the good. There's so much good when you choose to focus on that. And I think when we do that, there's a sense of joy that is just captivating to people, that brings folks together, that you're having fun even in the midst of stuff. Our pastor at church, right? He was actually comparing this time in American history to the time when Jesus was born, with Herod and all that kind of stuff. And, and how awful that must have been. And he's talking about, children under the age of 2 being killed and all that stuff. You could think about the early church with Nero and the Roman Empire. I mean, you can go back to Ronald Reagan himself, and you can talk about the Soviet Union and the threat of nuclear war. There's always going to be threats in our world, and there's always going to need to be strong people to fight them. But ultimately, that's not where our hope lies. That's not is being able to win this, that, and that battle. We fight them as best we can, but there's something deeper. And that, to me, is what the season is all about, and it's just, to me, it's much more clear this year than it has been in previous years. So anyway, that's my answer, but it's a great discussion. Is how do we build this up? How do we take these concepts and bring them, to a place where people can grapple with them? Something we do on this show. You got some great articles, Josh, as well, and I want to show these real quick before we have to go. Just some awesome content that you're putting out. Talking about the concepts of providence, right? That's kind of what I'm talking about here, is God's will. Talking about prescription, being able to use what we've seen in history and our traditions to be able to have wisdom for the future. We could talk about prudence, I'm sure, not going for radical, overthrowing of the things that our country has proven to be useful and successful over time. All of those, I think, are going to be very important concepts, as we head towards the future, and I'm excited about it. But I'm really excited for this show, for our relationship with you and the other folks that we've had on this. I really feel like we're going places. I feel like, the conservative movement needs us. And I feel like these conversations are just super important now as we start to promote, a thoughtful conservatism, and we join with other folks, to be able to promote that. So really exciting times, man. Really exciting. So, um, I know I'm going to have an exciting time finishing off this beer and finishing these cookies and spending some time with my family over the next few days, getting a few days off of work for sure. How about you guys? What you got? Any other plans for the next few days as you lead up to Christmas? Any like new traditions that you want to start? Obviously, I know Josh, you got the water that you're jumping into, so
I think that's enough for me.
you
I
get
am
your you got your fill.
this I tell you what, this is a Christmas to just sort of take it easy, right?
Yeah,
It's disrupted. I don't know about you guys, but it has disrupted the possibility of a lot of the traditions we ordinarily do,
yeah.
and that's okay. I think it makes Christmas all the sweeter when you can get together with family. But yeah, nothing. So unfortunately, it leaves me with not much to talk about other than the jumping into water. That, by the way, and kind of jumping back to that article you had up, that's part of
Yes.
will probably be a
I want to know more about it.
5-part series. I'm right smack in the middle of it. Trying to grapple with what is the nature between permanence and progression, especially as a conservative understands it, because oftentimes we were accused, not wrongly, of conserving the wrong things
Yeah.
or just applying the brakes. That all really a conservative has to say is just stop doing what you're doing, and we need to be able to offer something better. So trying to understand not necessarily what is the something better, but what is the philosophical foundation for an argument for things can be better under a conservative
Oh
worldview.
man,
So
yeah, you're speaking to my heart when you say that. It's like conservatives have to be in the business of culture
mhm.
building, and that can be as simple as like figuring out a Christmas book to read, or a movie to watch, right? Like not Jingle All the Way to the Grinch, in the Hiller's household, but like figuring out something that is real, like I mean, like you are the person in someone's life, whether it's son or daughter, like, wife, brother, whatever it is, like that relationship that you have with a person, capitalize on it and be yourself. Figure out what you like and what you don't like, what you can enjoy together, like, whatever it is, you build that culture just by saying, hey, I want to have a relationship with you, as a family member or a friend, and just taking that with some level of intentionality. That's all it really takes. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present, is what I would say, in order to do it. And a lot of folks, I think, are scared. I think they're scared of this year. They're scared of what you're talking about, Josh, of not being able to do the things the way that they've always done. And if you are a conservative who's only about the past, well, the
Mhm.
past is different than what we're encountering this year. But for those conservatives who aren't afraid to build culture, to try something new, I think this presents an opportunity to do that. Is, hey, last year we did it this way. This year we're going to do it a different way. And maybe it's less people, whatever it is. Maybe it's over Zoom or Skype or whatever. Like, it's fine. It's a chance to start a new tradition and to celebrate the fact that, hey, we're still alive. We're still alive, like making it through this thing as hard as it is. So,
I think consistency is just really key. I think having things that you can look forward to each week is super awesome. I mean, before we would take the girls out to go look at Christmas lights, and that would be like, okay, we did that. That was like one day out of the month, and now we're gonna do other things. And now it's more like we're gonna go look at Christmas lights like every week. you know, Christmas is a festival of lights now, and of course, we try and supplement it with like the creation story. God created light, God is light. And this is, part of the reason why Christmas has so many lights and that sort of thing. It kind of reminds me, like, well, it's kind of hard to justify when you see Olaf like blinking and deflating and whatnot. But like, I hope the point kind of still comes across. But
it
like,
does.
that's kind of what we're trying to build up there
Yeah.
is like, okay, we adapt it, we adapt to COVID regulations. And if we can stay in our car and look at some awesome Christmas lights, then
Yeah, maybe you
we'll do
just go for a walk, with your family. Like, it doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to be hard. You just take that step to overcome fear and not be paralyzed by it. And I think that's a hopefulness that we can dial into. And no matter what comes in 2021, whether, it's Biden administration this or socialist policies that, like, I'm not scared. I'm just not scared of it because, like, I know, what our faith is in. I know America's overcome all kinds of challenges before, and I know ultimately that those beliefs in providence and prescription and everything that you talk about, Josh, are real. The truth is real. Natural law, all those things, ethics are still going to be in place, and we're going to be there to fight it. We're going to be there to stand our ground, to do what's right. and and that's always going to be our calling, and we're well paced in that. And we've got momentum behind it. So that's exciting. We got a couple more comments here I want to go through before we finish off. So Roger says we are planning on finishing this bottle of rye. So there you go, my man, my man. And then Alex was talking about it's an excellent time to teach kids about gun safety. Absolutely. I got my kids some Nerf guns for the first time this year. So we plan on having some epic battles like in our house. It's going to be super fun. And then just get them started. They're very young, 3 and 4, but eventually we're going to get to that point where
I don't know that Nerf guns are the best way to teach children about gun safety, but you do you.
The very first Nerf gun that I gave Addie last year, she pointed it straight at her face and fired. And she has not done that since. But there you go.
Well, maybe it does work. Yeah.
Better than a BB gun. You'll shoot your eye out.
Do you remember that time when I shot you in the face with a Nerf gun? Yeah. All right. Now listen to me now.
I wish I had it on camera. I mean, she just kind of turned it. I was like, I know it's about to happen.
That's probably the only way that you can actually like demonstrate.
My niece, when she was just a little girl for her birthday, she got a water gun indoors, and I mean, she killed off the entire family. It was just the most delightful thing ever.
That's good. Yeah. So anyway, well, hey, thank you guys. This has been great. It's been an awesome year. So we'll have like more of like a New Year's show here coming up. But talking about traditions and stuff, like I think that's what we're hitting. With this is we're starting to get into a routine with the show, and I think the year upcoming is that type of tradition breeds success. Is starting to get into, like you said, John, a routine and all of that, starting to get comfortable, and then starting to promote the values that we have, the sense of hopefulness and joy that we have. It's going to be something that I think the world needs, and so I look forward to the future of it. So,
and Josh, I really think we should hit up on your articles the next time we talk. Yeah. I think that would be really great.
Yeah, we'll get into some details on that for sure. Look at some of those quotes. So, hey, thank you guys. Have a Merry Christmas. Have an awesome holiday. We'll see you in a week. Yep, and cheers, John. Absolutely. Take some pictures, whatever traditions you got, and we'll talk about them next week, and then we'll get into those articles, get into some more in-depth stuff, and then we'll see what kind of interviews we got coming up in the next few months. So, super exciting. Thanks, Josh, again. Saving Elephant Podcast, his websites, the blog, all that stuff, really great content. And then, John, thank you, as always, for being here. Alex, Roger, everybody else who commented, appreciate you guys. And we'll see you in a week.